It had no hierarchy. It sort of more or less gave franchise to anybody to throw a bomb and call itself Al Qaeda, and it was a it was a very fascinating. It remains a very fascinating organization in which, without a state, there is a military power scattered all over the world, which acts in a voluntary, cooperative way and can unleash a lot of damage. Now, this also has a precedent. When Napoleon was very powerful in the first 2 decades of the 19th century, in Spain, when the French invaded Spain, which is sort of next door to France, the Spanish peasantry organized itself. And the word guerrilla is actually a Spanish word. Guerre is, of course, war in French, and it is a Latin root. So guerrilla was invented, was coined for the Spanish. And the point was, it was not a regular army. There was no hierarchy, but they were very effective in fighting a war. And the guerrilla warfare is a whole interesting concept, which in Vietnam defeated the Americans. All the American bombing and all that didn't matter at all. They were totally outclassed by these Vietnamese peasants, and they kind of threw the Americans out. So Al Qaeda is a urban guerrilla warfare which is global, because it always says that the guerrilla warrior is very happy when he is in the community where he belongs. It is like being disappeared in an ocean of other friendly creatures, and then you're go and bite somebody. Now, the way the world has evolved, the guerrilla, the Islamist guerrilla fighter. I say Islamist, not Islamic, because Islamism is a political ideology. I've written a book about that, but I won't go into that. So there is an ideology whose adherents can be found anywhere in the world, because that's the way the world has developed. It's a globalized world. And the Americans haven't actually found a way around that. I mean, it is now less powerful than it used to be, but you can consider from 9/11 onwards, in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Americans have been fighting again in Afghanistan. Americans have been fighting again and again, and not actually getting anywhere. So on one hand, in the heteropolarity world, there is the urban guerrilla warfare, especially the Islamist guerrilla warfare. But then the surprise was, again, as Makran Parajpe was saying, the rise of China. Again, the delusions of the Bandung Conference, where somehow the sheer numbers of the Afro-Asian ex-colonies was so big that it will sort of defy or hold up a challenge to the two military powers. Pandit Nehru was definitely fascinated by that delusion, which he had launched. At that time, I remember that the Indian ambition was to teach the world the lessons of nonviolence and Mahatma Gandhi, and establish a moral superiority of the world. Well, moral superiority doesn't get you anywhere. You need arms. But I mean, the non-aligned movement was ultimately anti-American pro-Soviet movement. And it certainly didn't help India when India faced China. They all ran away, and India had to go to America and Israel for help. But China's rise as a power is again a very fascinating story, because China is the world's oldest continuous state. It's not just a civilization, as India is a civilization, but China has a continuous state going back 2,000 years without any interruption. The dynasty may have changed, and some of the dynasties came from outside China, but China has had a single imperial state all its history, more or less all its history. There are about 200 years of division, but otherwise, and China has always thought of itself as Middle Earth, as the biggest power in the world, which it was until about, say, early 19th century. Until about 1800, China was the biggest power in the world. Technologically very advanced. It was fairly prosperous, a lot of population. India had a similar population, but it had many kingdoms inside it and no single power. And the Chinese self-consciousness is not to teach the world a moral lesson. That kind of ambition is very Indian ambition, sort of spiritual, moral, non-violent, all that. China wants to become the number one power of the world. They want, again, to be Middle Earth. They lost against the British in the Opium Wars in the 1830s, late 1830s, and they want to get back. And the way China has developed between 1980, China wasted 30 years after the revolution, but we won't talk about that. Mao was a complete waste of time. But from time of Deng Xiaoping onwards, this concentration with which China has developed and invested in advanced technology in a single-minded way, China has become a formidable economic and military power. And today, the Americans are frightened of Chinese competition. They are trying to shut China out of their territory, Huawei and all that, because China is threatening by outcompeting America by its technology. And so the 21st century heteropolarity has America as a power, and America has gone through a very interesting phase under Donald Trump. I mean, people think Donald Trump is a fool and all that sort of thing. He's a sore loser and all that. But one thing about Donald Trump was that Donald Trump decided that American participation in the global order, idea that America will police the world, America will go and fight everywhere, and NATO and all that. He decided that it is a complete waste of money. That America had spent all this money regarding the earth. In the meantime, it had become it had been losing in terms of international trade. It was running a balance of trade deficit with the world, and the people it was supposed to be helping, Germany and France and UK, not UK, but Germany and other European powers. They were not spending any money on their own defense, even the 2% required, 2% of GDP required by NATO. So they were living off America and then giving moral lessons to America about human rights and this and that. So he decided, I'm not playing this game anymore. Had he won the second term, he would have dismantled NATO. So America was trying to become isolationist like it used to be before the First World War. And it's quite likely that while Biden will try and become the active, what I would call imperialistic America, I don't think American economy has the strength and depth and to be able to be what it was. And I think what election has shown that America is a deeply divided country, seriously divided country, white majority, which is unhappy that it is losing power, and a lot of the other people who have been inside now to sort of earn its rightful place in the world, in the Black Americans, Hispanics, and the poor whites and so on. So America is definitely not going to be the guarantee for world order. China is definitely going to be challenging America for for hegemony. Uh, Again, Macron Paranchwe mentioned the UN and the IMF and the World Bank. Now, those institutions were created by the Allies. And indeed, they are not democratic at all. The UN is not a democratic institution because the 5 permanent members are veto, and they basically, they can block any countries. Even the majority of General Assembly may say whatever it likes, but one single big power can block it. So China can get away with the concentration camps for the Uyghurs, because who is going to complain against China in the UN? It will veto everything else and stop everybody else. So the UN is based on a principle of inequality, which is why I've always thought that it has failed. It has failed to solve a single international dispute, Kashmir or Israel-Palestine war or Cyprus. It has never ever settled a single problem. It's very good in its agents, UNDP and UNCTAD and FAO. Its agents are very good, but the UN itself has not succeeded in doing one thing it was supposed to do, which is establish world peace. So here we are. The UN is not functioning in terms of world peace. Various clusters, G5, G20, the Shanghai Dialogue, and all that, are all being created. The BRICS, which is a very peculiar sort of association. Now, what's going on is that you're trying to manage a world in which there are no more sort of dominant great powers as there used to be, but military sort of powers are capable of competing for domination. And basically, that is what is right now going on. Now, obviously, in India, as everywhere else, people don't actually care about the world. They care about what happens to India in this heteropolarity world. Where is India? And so I better come to that. And I have to say my view on that is somewhat stark, and may not. Will prove to be controversial. I think that India, in a sense, was in self-denial after independence. Again, it has this uniqueness disease. It wants to be unique. It just don't want to. It wants to be somewhere up out there on its own, the only one in the club, to show to the world that India is fantastic, the oldest civilization, this, that, and other thing. So that is what Nehru was trying to do. We were not only independent, we were leading Asia, and we were leading Afro-Asia and all that. And ultimately, it did not have friends. We found out in 1962 that India had no friends in the intellectual sphere, except that its natural friends obviously were in the West. There was no doubt in anybody's mind that India belonged to the Western camp. We prefer speaking English. We prefer going to UK or US for studying, or even when we want to migrate, we want to go to that. Very few Indian students went to the Soviet Union to study, but they all went to Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge, because we are naturally Western aligned, partly because of because of language and because of the British domination, but also in a sense this old story of Indo-European languages that Sir William Jones sort of argued, that Latin and Sanskrit and Greek are kind of one family of languages, and therefore we all have one original ancestral, community somewhere in Northern Europe or wherever it was. Be that true or not, what is true is that Indians, in my view, have never thought of themselves as Asians. They've always thought of themselves as Europeans. We worry much more about what the Guardian says or the New York Times says. We don't worry about the Asahi Shimbun. We don't even know what the Asahi Shimbun says. We have somebody told me once that when he was in Bangkok, he was a journalist, Indian journalist. He says, I'm the only Indian journalist in Thailand, whereas America has several people here, and so do the Russians, so do the Chinese. He says, Indians don't want to hear about Thailand. Indians don't care about what Asia says about itself. Indians really worry about what the British Parliament is saying about India. And so India is basically a west-facing country, and ultimately it will have to be in the Western camp. It's not going to be in any other camp except the Western camp, and this is one of the things that India has to admit to itself, that is where its friends are. Its friends are not anywhere. Anywhere in Asia. Incidentally, just as a footnote, the only Indian leader, he's not quite a political leader, the only Indian leader who directed his attention to Asia was Tagore. Tagore is the only person who went to China and Japan on his own and had a whole debate with the Chinese and the Japanese about what it meant to be Asia, what it meant culture. And the Japanese wanted to ban Tagore because he was too pacifist, and they wanted to have a macho military culture. The Chinese also used to say, don't talk to this man because he is going to mislead you into giving up military power and going for peace. I mean, neither Mahatma Gandhi nor Nehru went to Asia, at least until Nehru until after independence. And what you have is, India is westward-looking country, and it basically will have to just go and find friends in the West. And so in a heteropolarity world, what is the worst case scenario? I always find that at all times, look at the worst case scenario. What's the worst that can happen, and can we live with it? And the worst case scenario has been discussed lately in the last year or 15 months very much. And that is the prospect of a conflict between China and the US. And especially with the Xi Jinping having really started this program of re-establishing China as a Middle Earth, and he has said sort of this is no longer the gently model of the Deng Xiaoping, that you become powerful but don't kind of show your power. This is demonstrating your power, that you are the top country, you have the best army, you have the best weapons, best technology, and take the world on. Now, China, one has to remember, like all nations, most nations have a theory that the territory they have is insufficient. There are other bits of territory lying around which should really belong to them. That's one very basic part of nationalism. And the Irish, the Republic of Ireland, had in its constitution the idea that the 6 counties which now constitute Northern Ireland will have to come back into Ireland. Then alone Ireland will be a complete nation. China has a similar sort of clause in its constitution, which says that Taiwan must be reabsorbed into China. Taiwan is part of China, and Taiwan cannot be outside China. So one of the items in Xi Jinping program is taking over Taiwan. And I think China could take over Taiwan in 24 hours. But Americans will then have to fight. They'll have to demonstrate that the guarantee they have given to Taiwan all these years has any meaning. And so there will be a war between America and China regarding Taiwan. But, and this is where I think India gets in, it will spread over, it will connect with the India-China border war. American soldiers, as I've said before, America has never won a ground war in Asia. And so I don't think American troops will be able to fight in the Himalayas. But Indian troops will fight probably with American air support, and the American Navy will fight in the Pacific, trying to defend Taiwan. And it is a plausible scenario that one way the heteropolarity might end up is in that scenario, in a war in Asia, because the first two world wars were in Europe, a war in Asia of a serious nature. Now, if it doesn't, let's hope it doesn't lead to use of nuclear weapons, in which case it will be a long drawn-out war, in which the main theater would be on the India-China border. And remember, India-China border is not just the Himalayas, and I was saying this to somebody who's surprised. What people forget is that during the Second World War, China was supplied with arms on a road which goes out of Assam into Kunming. And it was built specially at that time to supply arms to China. From India, it went into China. So India is exposed both on the Himalayan side and on the northeast frontier. I mean, I may be completely wrong, and the world may be very peaceful and, Hindi chini bye bye and all that. But, my task here is to make you troubled thinking, not happy. I don't believe in leaving my sort of listeners happy. I want them to be troubled and thinking and reading and trying to show I'm wrong. That would satisfy me very much. But my view is that this worst case scenario has to be thought about, discussed, because it is, as of now, the most likely outcome there is. I mean, there are minor problems like UK leaving EU and so on, but those are kind of trade problems. Whether the global trade system will change or not, and if it changes, it will adjust itself. Capitalism is infinitely inventive, so it'll manage itself. But the geopolitics is something in which, because there is no single overarching peacemaking body like United Nations was supposed to be, ultimately it will be a war that would possibly solve this problem. Perhaps not. Perhaps we may be able to have, like in the Cold War. The Cold War lasted 50 years with no serious confrontation between the two great powers, but it ended with one power collapsing on its own. And I don't think it's going to be China. And because I think the way what the presidential elections have shown in America is how deeply divided the American society is, how it has got lots of problems, which are really very serious problems of class and poverty and sort of problems with the education system and so on. And America may just be embarking on its decline. No, decline can last for 50 years. The UK has been declining for at least all the years I've been there. More or less since India became independent, UK has been declining. It is not an uncomfortable position. If you already reached a high level of income, you can decline very comfortably, get very civilized, lovely culture, very nice, kind people, and all that. The angst is gone, and you can just enjoy your retirement from being a world power. And that is, of course, part of the Brexit problem is that some people are not happy like that. They still want England to be exceptional and great and so on. But one of the thing about heteropolarity would be the likely scenario in which the USA goes into gentle decline in the next 30 years. So I think I have, don't know how long I've spoken. I should answer questions because there are many, many more things I could talk about. But the world is not going to be a safe place. On that happy note, I ask you to ask me questions.
Thank you, Lord Desai. I was struck by two or three things you said and quite disturbed too, which is what you wanted us to be, which is that the world is not going to be a cozy and comfortable place in the decades to come. And one of the things I think you said, which we still hesitate to say, is that India belongs in the Western camp. Nobody in India has come out and said it. Even our EAM uh, keeps dodging that issue and tries to somehow sort of balance India's position, carrying forward notions of neutrality and non-alignment and so forth. However, one of the things that has emerged in the last, I would say, 10 or 20 years, and you should know because you got the Pravasi Bharatiya Award, is that the Indian diaspora is very powerful, almost like the Israeli diaspora. It's not possible for a major Western power like the US to be anti India anymore. So, if India and the US don't belong together as large democracies with shared values, it's hard to imagine where India will fit in, frankly. And I think that going back a little farther during our independence struggle, no Indian leader except Subhash Chandra Bose thought of aligning with Germany or Japan. Even though they did not like Britain, they still felt that India's future was in the democratic, liberal world. So this makes us think whether notions of the Quad and notions of realigning ourselves more openly with the US are are really in our interests, and perhaps we might do that openly. And one more point I had, which you didn't quite bring up, but I think it's also important, that the Middle East is changing drastically. Saudi Arabia itself, with MBS, the great
Mm.
crown prince now. I mean,
Mm.
there's a wave of liberalism in Saudi Arabia and UAE, and they are openly condemning certain trends and tendencies. In fact, they've just deported some people in Saudi Arabia who were using Saudi soil to mount a campaign against India and CAA. So, like Singapore, which didn't want its gurdwaras to be used during the Khalistan movement against India, and they just shut down these dissident groups using their soil to attack India.